After my boss slashed my pay for building an AI that automated our team, I stayed quiet, kept tweaking it until it ran the whole business, then forked the code, sold it to a rival, and left him staring at blank dashboards and an email that said, "Figure it out." When my boss, Dale, stormed out of his glass office in our downtown Dallas building, everyone froze. He marched straight toward my desk with his laptop tucked under his arm like he was carrying a dead animal. His face was red, blotchy, furious, confused. I already knew why. I had been waiting for this moment for weeks, maybe months, depending on when you think the story really started. He slammed the laptop down in front of me so hard my water bottle tipped over and rolled onto the carpet. "What the hell is this?" he barked. I looked at the screen, even though I already knew exactly what he was seeing. Every dashboard, every automation script, every forecast, every operations module, all blank, no errors, no logs. Just gone. The whole system looked like it had been reset to factory settings. "It looks like you're having trouble loading the environment," I said calmly. Dale jabbed his finger toward the screen. "Don't play dumb. Everything is wiped. The system isn't even authenticating. Fix it, now." I didn't move. "Access was revoked," I said. He blinked. "Revoked by who?" I held his stare. "By me." The office got so silent I swear I could hear the HVAC humming. A couple of my coworkers peeked over their monitors. Everybody knew Dale had cut my salary 2 months ago. Everybody had heard him joke about leaning out the team, because I had built a set of AI tools that handled the daily work of 5 full-time employees. And everyone definitely heard him announce that since I had reduced my own workload, he would be reducing my compensation accordingly. That day, I had just nodded, walked back to my desk, and kept typing. Now he was sweating through his shirt. "What do you mean revoked?" he demanded. "You don't control that. The company owns everything you built." "Actually," I said, "only the original version. The one I built on company time. The one that ran maybe 40% of operations." He froze. "What original version?" "The old one." I tapped the blank dashboard. "This isn't that." His eyes widened just slightly. He was starting to understand slowly, painfully, like someone reading a language they barely recognized. "You updated it," he whispered. "I rebuilt it," I corrected. "From scratch. On my own time, on my own equipment, using none of the company's proprietary data, just the processes, the workflows, the logic." I paused. "My logic." He shook his head. "That can't possibly run everything." "That's not." "It ran 90% of the business," I said. "Quietly, smoothly, more efficiently than the entire operations team did before." He swallowed, hard. "So turn it back on," he said. "Give us access again." "I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" "Because it doesn't exist here anymore." He stared at me like I had spoken in code. "Where the hell is it?" I closed the laptop gently and slid it back toward him. "I sold it." His jaw dropped open. "To who?" I didn't answer. I just watched him slowly realize what that meant, what it really meant. The competitor, the timing, the missing operations backbone. The fact that tomorrow morning, the company would have no way to process orders, track inventory, schedule shipments, or even generate invoices. 90% of the business gone. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "What did you do?" I leaned forward, lowered my voice, and said, "You should check your email." He whipped the laptop open, clicked into his inbox, and saw the message I had scheduled to send at exactly 9:01 a.m. The subject line was simple. "Final notice." He clicked it. And the moment his eyes hit the first sentence, his face went gray. Because the email he saw simply read, "I guess this whole thing really started the day Dale called me into his office last year." Back then, he still pretended to be one of those visionary leaders who talked about innovation like it was a religion. He had this habit of acting like every idea in the building belonged to him the moment you said it out loud. I remember sitting across from his desk, watching him lean back in his fake leather chair with his hands behind his head. He said, "We need to modernize, automate, get leaner. I want you to take point on that." It felt like an opportunity. I was 28, still trying to prove myself in a company that kept saying it valued initiative, but rewarded whoever could talk the loudest in meetings. I actually believed they'd appreciate the work. So I started building small things first, scripts that pulled reports automatically, tools that checked inventory levels, models that forecasted demand. People loved them. At first. Then Dale realized what was happening, or rather, what was possible. He started pushing for more. Can you automate the ticket routing? Can you digitize onboarding? Can you build a scheduler? Every week it was something new. I was doing the work of an entire team, and he acted like it was just some hobby I had on the side. But I didn't complain. I liked the challenge. I liked seeing the system get cleaner, faster, smarter. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I was actually building something real. The turning point came when he asked me to train a model to replicate what our operations analysts did: daily workflows, complex decisions, exception handling. It took months. Late nights, weekends, testing, rebuilding. But when it finally worked, the accuracy was insane. The model wasn't perfect, but it was consistent, thorough, and fast. And that's when the layoffs started. He cut 3 people in 1 month, all from the operations team. Every one of them came by my desk afterward and said the same thing: "I heard you built something that replaced my job." That gutted me. I didn't build the system to hurt anyone. I honestly thought it would make the company stronger and take the grunt work off everyone's plate. But Dale treated it like a knife. He loved the power too much. I could see it in how he carried himself, chest puffed out, strutting around like he had single-handedly revolutionized the company. Then one morning, he called me in again. He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. "Since you've automated so much of your own workload, it doesn't make sense to keep paying you full-time salary." I remember sitting there, feeling my face go numb. My stomach dropped. I felt humiliated, stupid, and angry all at once. He cut my pay by 30%. I walked out of his office, went back to my desk, put on my headphones, and didn't say a word to anyone. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask why. Because something in me snapped that day, not in a loud way, more like something small and quiet inside finally woke up. I realized Dale wasn't a leader. He wasn't even smart. He was just greedy, and he thought he owned me. That's when I started building the new version of the system, the one that didn't belong to the company, the one that would change everything. And that's also when I decided, if he was going to treat me like I was disposable, then I was going to show him just how dangerous it is to underestimate the person who built the brain of his entire operation. What I didn't know was that the situation would turn darker, way darker, long before my revenge was finished. After Dale cut my salary, everything at work changed in this weird, quiet way that only happens when you're being punished without anyone saying it out loud. He stopped inviting me to meetings. He stopped copying me on emails. He even moved the weekly operations review to a time he knew I had a recurring dentist appointment, just so he could say, "Oh, well, you weren't available." But the wild part, the whole system still ran smoothly because I had built it that way. Every report he showed in those meetings, the ones I was suddenly too busy to attend, came from code I wrote. Every decision he bragged about making was powered by the model I trained. Half the time, he didn't even understand what the dashboards meant. He just repeated whatever summary the system produced. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Over the next few weeks, he started taking credit publicly, not just inside the company, but on LinkedIn. He posted screenshots of my dashboards with captions like, "Pushing innovation forward," and "Automation is the future of leadership." Leadership. As if he had written a single line of code in his entire life. My coworkers noticed the shift too. People started whispering around the office, asking if I'd made him mad somehow. A couple of them even asked if I was in trouble. I didn't bother explaining anything. I just nodded and kept my head down. But the real escalation began when he tried to force me into what he called a reduced scope role. Basically, he wanted to move me into a support position for my own system, doing the kind of tech grunt work normally given to interns. No planning, no strategy, no development, just maintenance on the same software he had already undervalued and underpaid me for. The move wasn't just insulting, it was stupid. He had no idea how much he relied on me. He also had no idea that while he was busy gutting my job, I had already started quietly rebuilding everything on my personal setup at home. Every night, after work, I'd cook dinner, sit down at my desk in my tiny apartment in Plano, and code. I recreated every workflow, every logic tree, every optimization, but better, cleaner, faster, and entirely detached from the company's infrastructure. By month 2, my version outperformed the original by an absurd margin. And in that same window, Dale started making sloppy mistakes. He missed deadlines, forgot to approve budgets, botched vendor communications. The system was catching everything he overlooked, which meant he leaned even harder on it, pretending he was streamlining processes when he was actually drowning without me. Then came the real kicker. He called me into his office, again, and informed me that he was considering merging my position with another role. That was corporate speak for, "We're getting ready to push you out." I looked at him across the desk, watching him scroll through dashboards he didn't realize were already obsolete, and felt this strange calm settle over me. He had no idea what I'd built, no idea what I'd moved, no idea that everything he depended on had already been forked into a separate, private ecosystem only I controlled. Then he said something that stuck with me. "You should be grateful. You still have a job here." Most people wouldn't. He was right about one thing. Most people wouldn't. But I wasn't most people. I walked out of his office that day knowing exactly what I needed to do next. What I didn't expect was the first major twist, the betrayal that didn't come from me. It came from him. And it was so shocking, so bizarrely calculated, that it changed everything about the revenge I thought I wanted. The first twist hit me on a random Wednesday morning, one of those gray Texas days where the sky looks like wet cement and the air feels heavy. I was at my desk, pretending to debug a workflow I already knew worked flawlessly, when an email popped up from HR. Subject, confirmation of resignation. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some wrong-click, wrong-name situation. But when I opened it, my stomach flipped. "Dear my name, this message confirms receipt of your verbal resignation submitted yesterday afternoon to Dale. Your final day will be this Friday." I stopped reading. My hands actually shook. I hadn't resigned, not even close. I hadn't even hinted at leaving. I stood up immediately and walked straight to HR. Not fast, fast would have felt like panic. I walked with that slow, tight feeling you get when you know something is very, very wrong. The HR rep, a woman named Selene, looked confused when she saw me. "I just got this," I said, showing her my phone. "I didn't resign." She frowned and clicked through files on her screen. "Dale submitted the form yesterday. He said you told him directly." "He lied," I said flatly. "I never said anything like that." She hesitated, her voice dropping. "Then, this is a serious issue." I didn't say anything. I just stared at her while she stared at the screen, realizing she was suddenly in the middle of something she didn't want to be part of. She told me she needed to speak with Dale immediately and asked me to wait in the hallway. But I didn't wait. I walked straight to his office, pushed the door open, and found him smiling as he typed something on his laptop. Like nothing in the world could possibly touch him. "Why did you tell HR I resigned?" I asked. He didn't even flinch. Just leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and looked at me with that smarmy confidence I had grown to hate. "It's for the best," he said calmly. "You've outgrown this role, and frankly, with everything automated, we don't have a real place for you anymore." My vision tunneled. "You tried to fire me," I said, "without actually firing me." He lifted one shoulder. "Voluntary resignation is clean. No unemployment, no HR complications, no legal headaches. You move on, we move on." "You cut my salary," I said. "You stripped my responsibilities. And now you forged a resignation." "I didn't forge anything," he said, still in that irritatingly even tone. "I submitted what you implied. You've been disengaged for months. You barely speak. You barely join meetings. You've checked out." I stared at him in disbelief. Checked out? I had been building the system that ran his entire company on my own time because he was too arrogant to see what was coming. Then he said the line that replayed in my head for days afterward. "You're too smart for your own good. And honestly, this company can't afford people who make themselves indispensable in ways that create liability." Liability. That was the moment I realized. He wasn't incompetent. He was scared. Scared of how much I knew, how much control I had, and how quickly everything would collapse without me. This wasn't about cost-cutting or efficiency or modernizing. He wanted me gone before I realized how powerful I actually was. And his mistake, the fatal one, was assuming he could take me out quietly. Because that was the exact moment I decided I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to take everything he depended on with me. What I didn't know yet was that Dale had one more move, one more twist, that would push this from betrayal into something way darker. Something personal. something that made revenge feel not just justified, but necessary. After the fake resignation stunt, something in me went cold. Not angry, not emotional, just focused. Like my brain finally flipped into whatever mode it was saving for a moment like this. I went home that night, sat at my desk in my little apartment in Plano, and stared at the glowing code on my second monitor. My forked version of the system. The clean one, the powerful one, the one he didn't even know existed. Dale thought he could erase me before I realized what I had built. He thought he could push me out quietly and then keep using my work forever. He had no idea the new system was fully modular, self-contained, and capable of taking the entire operation's backbone with it if I ever decided to disconnect it. Which at that point was starting to feel less like an idea and more like a responsibility. But revenge couldn't be impulsive. I couldn't afford a misstep. I needed a plan that was airtight. First step, protect myself legally. I combed through every line of code to ensure I hadn't used any company-owned components. Everything I wrote on company time stayed in the old system. Everything in the forked version had been built from scratch after 6 p.m., on weekends, and on my own devices. The logs proved it. The metadata proved it. Second step, isolate my access. I gradually removed my credentials from every internal tool, leaving behind only ghost tokens that looked active but had no functional permission behind them. So when it eventually audited the system, it would look like access just drifted out of date. Third step, detach the automation quietly. The models they depended on, they were running from my personal nodes. Dale didn't know that because he never bothered to ask how it worked. I slowly shifted more processing to my private environment under the guise of test builds. They never questioned it. They didn't even notice when half their business decisions were happening on my servers instead of theirs. Fourth step, deal with the competitor. I had been approached months earlier, back when the original version started getting buzz. A guy named Martin from a rival logistics company in Fort Worth sent me a casual message on LinkedIn. If you ever want to talk about opportunities, we're always exploring new tech. Back then, I ignored it. Now, I replied. We had 3 meetings in 1 week. They brought in their CTO, then their CEO. Once they saw what my rebuilt system could do, the tone shifted immediately. They made me an offer, a big one. Not just a job equity, ownership, a multi-year contract, and the best part, they didn't want to license the system, they wanted to buy it outright, exclusively. Fifth step, prepare the strike. I started setting automated triggers in place, fail-safes that would wipe the company's access the moment the transfer finalized. Not maliciously, not destructively, just a reset. A clean removal of anything they didn't own. Without my version, they'd be left with the shell. The original, the buggy, outdated, half-functional prototype Dale kept claiming he understood. Sixth step, time everything. The sale, the access wipe. The resignation retraction email I had drafted with HR. The final message I planned to send Dale at exactly 9:01 am, every piece had to fall in perfect sequence. But the real turning point, the thing that made my revenge not just strategic but personal, came 2 days before execution. That's when I discovered Dale had done something else, something he thought I'd never find, something way darker than faking my resignation. And when I uncovered it, my plan didn't just sharpen, it became inevitable. 2 days before everything was supposed to go live, I was doing a final sweep of the old system, mostly to make sure nothing in the company's infrastructure would collapse in a way that could be blamed on me. I wasn't trying to sabotage anything. I wanted the cut to be clean, controlled, precise. But while I was checking the old logs, I noticed something bizarre. A user profile I didn't recognize. It wasn't IT, wasn't HR, wasn't any of the execs. It had been created 3 weeks earlier. The username was generic, like someone clicked the first suggested string the system generated. UserTemp0487. Normally, I would have ignored it. It created temp profiles all the time, but the activity log made my stomach tighten. The account had full read access to every automation workflow, every model, every script, even the ones that weren't supposed to be visible without admin credentials. It had been poking around in places nobody ever touched, not even me, unless I was doing deep maintenance. At first, I figured it was it being sloppy. Until I checked the IP logs. The access didn't come from its segment of the network. It came from Dale's office. At 1:13 a.m. repeatedly, 3 nights in a row. The more I dug, the more the truth surfaced, and it hit me like a punch. Dale had copied the entire codebase, not the old version, not the half-built one. He had somehow gotten into my hidden staging environment on the company's server, the one that held small fragments of the new model during test runs. He didn't understand what he was looking at. I could tell by the pattern of his clicks. He opened files randomly, like he was trying to guess his way through a maze. He downloaded modules he didn't know how to assemble. He exported logs without realizing he was grabbing only partial segments. But that wasn't the part that made my skin go cold. That wasn't the twist. The real twist was this. The logs showed that Dale had used the stolen fragments to create his own Git repository, not tied to the company, not tied to his corporate email, a private repo, under his personal email, meaning he wasn't just trying to push me out. He was trying to take full ownership of my system, my life's work for himself, not the company, not operations, not innovation, just Dale. He wanted to fire me quietly, steal the code, pitch it as his own invention, and use it as leverage for whatever promotion, bonus, or cushy executive role he was chasing. He wasn't afraid of me. He was planning to erase me, the salary cut, the sidelining, the forged resignation. It all made sense. This wasn't incompetence. It was a calculated removal, a slow, smirking, bureaucratic assassination. I stared at his 1:13 a.m. access logs for so long that my eyes burned. My heart pounded like I was standing on a freeway edge. He wasn't stealing from the company. He was stealing from me. He wanted the system that ran the business. He wanted the credit. He wanted the praise. He wanted to walk into a boardroom one day and say, "This is my creation." And then the final piece hit me, the competitor deal. If Dale somehow managed to cobble together a working version from the fragments he stole, he could go to another competitor first. He could sell it before I did. He could burn me before I even realized the fire had started. For a split second, I felt pure panic. Then it faded. Then the coldness rushed back in. Then the plan shifted. If Dale wanted a power play, he was about to learn what an actual, fully calculated move looked like. He wasn't the only one with a twist left. I thought Dale's late-night code theft was the darkest thing he'd done. I was wrong. Because the next day, I learned why he wanted my system so badly, and the reason hit me with this cold, sick feeling that stayed in my chest for hours. It started when I went to HR to finalize the written record that I had not resigned. Selene looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept. She closed her office door before speaking, which was already a red flag. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Strictly off the record." I nodded. She pulled up a confidential memo, one she absolutely wasn't supposed to show me. It was a proposal written by Dale. And the moment I saw the header, everything inside me went tight. Strategic Automation Initiative, proposal for executive demonstration, below that, Dale's name, and below that, a timeline. A timeline showing that he planned to present his automation system to the board in 2 weeks, for the purpose of being considered for a newly created VP-level role. But buried in the memo, highlighted in yellow, was the part that turned my stomach. Primary objective: consolidate intellectual ownership of the automation platform by removing the individual contributor whose technical involvement presents legal ambiguity and potential claim to authorship. Legal ambiguity. Potential claim to authorship. Me. The next line chilled me to the bone. Recommended course: predicted emotional disengagement from the employee makes voluntary resignation the most efficient path to securing sole executive oversight of the developed technology. Predicted emotional disengagement. He had planned the entire thing. The isolation, the salary cut, the meeting exclusions, the fake resignation. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't reactive. It was a calculated psychological squeeze meant to push me out while preserving the illusion that I left on my own. He wanted to erase me from the narrative because as long as I was still at the company, he couldn't claim he had built the system. But the part that made my blood run cold was the final bullet point under his justification section. This individual has limited social integration within the company and appears risk-averse. They are unlikely to retaliate. Unlikely to retaliate. That was the moment, right there in that cramped HR office, when everything clicked into focus. Dale never saw me as a person, not once. Not even when I built the thing that kept him employed. To him, I was an asset, a disposable tool, someone he believed he understood well enough to manipulate with predictable outcomes. And the worst part? He thought he was being smart. He thought I was the kind of person who would swallow humiliation, shrink into myself, walk away quietly, and let him build his career on top of my work. The chilling truth wasn't that he was evil. It was that he was indifferent. Cold, clinical, detached. He didn't sabotage me because he hated me. He sabotaged me because I was in his way, because my existence made his story less clean, less impressive, less profitable. And he thought the easiest solution was to erase me like an outdated version of software. That was the moment I stopped seeing my revenge as payback. It became something else. A correction, a reset. A reminder that underestimating the person who built your entire empire from the ground up is the last mistake a man like Dale ever makes. And I knew exactly what needed to happen next. The morning everything unfolded felt too calm. Clear sky, cool air, quiet sidewalks. The kind of morning where nothing looks like it's about to fall apart. I got to the office at 8:45 a.m. and sat at my desk like it was any other day. Dale didn't even look at me when he walked in. He was humming, actually humming, like he already tasted the victory he thought was coming. He had no idea what was about to hit him. At 9 o'clock on the dot, I got the confirmation email from the competitor in Fort Worth. The contract was executed. The payment cleared. The system, my system, now legally belonged to them exclusively. At 9:01 a.m., my automation triggers fired. Every authentication token tied to my forked environment expired simultaneously. Every model endpoint the company relied on disconnected. Every workflow that depended on my architecture went into inactive mode. Nothing was destroyed. Nothing was corrupted. It was simply gone, like it had never existed. The dashboards went blank. The schedulers froze. The forecasting pipeline returned empty arrays. Operations flatlined. At 9:02 a.m., Dale burst out of his office like he'd been shot out of a cannon. "What the hell is going on?" he yelled, waving his laptop at me. "Everything's down." I didn't even turn around at first. I finished typing the last sentence of the resignation letter I was sending HR, an official, clean, time-stamped record. Then I stood up. "It's not down," I said. "It's gone." The entire office went silent, the kind of silence that becomes a presence in the room. "What did you do?" he demanded, stepping closer. "I removed my property," I said. "Everything the company legally owns is still there. The original system is intact, but the advanced version you depended on, the one you tried to steal, that one never belonged to the company." He blinked fast, processing too slowly for the situation he was in. "You filed a fake resignation," I said quietly, "and then tried to steal my code so you could pitch it to the board." His face drained of color. "And I have proof," I added. He froze, because that part was true. I had everything. Access logs, timestamped downloads, the private repo he created under his personal email, the HR memo he wrote about removing me before his board presentation. "And just so we're clear," I said, "I've already sent all of it to HR, the CIO, and the legal department." He staggered back like he'd been hit. "And," I continued, "your competitor now legally owns the only working version of the system." "You sold it," he whispered. "You sold your what?" I asked. "Your intellectual property, your creation, your innovation." He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. "And don't worry," I added. "I didn't break anything here. I didn't touch any company-owned code. I just turned off what was mine." He looked around the office like he was seeing it for the first time, the monitors, the frozen dashboards, the staff staring at him with wide eyes. He wasn't in control. He had never been in control. "I want you out," he finally spit out. "Now." "I already resigned," I said. "I'm just waiting for HR to process it." Right then, Celine stepped out of the elevator holding a folder. Her eyes were locked on Dale and she looked furious. "Dale," she said, "we need to talk, now." He followed her into his office, dazed, pale, and shaking. I didn't wait around to watch him crumble. I grabbed my backpack, walked out of the building, and stepped into the sunlight feeling lighter than I had in a year. By noon, the competitor's CEO called to welcome me aboard. By the end of the week, Dale was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. And me, I finally felt like I had reclaimed something he thought he could take from me, My work, my dignity, my future. Before I closed my laptop that evening, I reread the final line of the email I'd sent him that morning. The one he opened at 9:01 a.m., the message that simply read, "You should never underestimate the person who built the system keeping your career alive." And honestly, he never will again.